Part 3. Seeds of Rebellion. The kingdom of Astralis trembled beneath whispers. What had begun as quiet gatherings in hidden warehouses now rippled outward into the streets, into the markets, into the homes of ordinary people. Beta spoke of Caelith's vision with cautious hope, Omegas whispered of freedom, even Alphas weary of dominance began to wonder if the chains could be broken. Eren felt the change like a current beneath his feet. He had once believed himself powerless, a discarded Omega with no place in the world. Now, he found himself seated at tables where ideas were born, where plans were drawn, where voices of every designation spoke as equals. He listened, he learned, and slowly he began to speak. At first, his words were hesitant. He shared fragments of his own suffering, the toxic marriage, the humiliation, the exile from his family. But as he spoke, he saw the way others leaned closer, the way their eyes softened, the way his pain resonated with theirs. He realized his voice carried weight, not because of strength, but because of survival. Caelith encouraged him. "You are proof," he said one night as they walked home beneath the stars. "Proof that the system destroys lives. Proof that endurance is strength. They will listen to you." Eren's heart swelled with both pride and fear. He had never imagined himself as anything more than a shadow. Now he was becoming a symbol. But symbols drew attention. The ruling families began to stir. Laws tightened, surveillance grew harsher, punishments more severe. Rumors of rebellion reached their ears, and they responded with iron. One evening, Caelith returned home with blood on his sleeve. Eren rushed to him, panic flooding his chest. "What happened?" Caelith's voice was calm, but his eyes burned. "They tried to silence us. But we will not be silenced." Eren's fear deepened. He had dreamed of peace, of a simple life, but now he stood at the edge of storm. He wanted to beg Caelith to stop, to abandon the dream, to cling to the quiet they had built. But he could not, because deep down, he knew the dream was worth the risk. And so, Eren began to change. He no longer hid in the shadows. He stood beside Caelith at gatherings, spoke to crowds, shared his story. His voice trembled, but it carried. And in carrying it inspired. The seeds of rebellion had been planted. And Eren, once discarded, had become part of their growth. The whispers of rebellion grew louder, and with them came danger. The 12 families, long accustomed to unquestioned dominance, began to tighten their grip. Patrols increased in the streets, curfews were imposed, and punishments for dissent grew harsher. Yet, despite the iron fist of tradition, the people stirred. Eren found himself at the center of it all. Once discarded, once voiceless, he now stood beside Caelith as gatherings swelled in number. Warehouses overflowed, markets buzzed with secret conversations, homes became havens for whispered plans. And when Eren spoke, his words carried weight. "I was born into one of the 12 families," he told a crowd one evening, his voice trembling but clear. "I was given away in marriage, discarded when I could not meet their expectations. I was told I was weak, worthless, a burden. But I survived. And I stand here now to tell you, we are not defined by their chains. We are more than the roles they force upon us." The crowd erupted in murmurs of agreement, some with tears in their eyes. Eren's story was theirs too, in different forms. Betas denied positions of influence, Omegas forced into unions, Alphas crushed beneath the weight of dominance. His voice became a mirror, reflecting their pain, their endurance, their hope. Caelith watched him with quiet pride. "You are becoming what they fear most," he whispered later. "A voice they cannot silence." But the ruling families were not idle. They began to send spies into the gatherings, infiltrating Caelith's network. Arrests followed, sudden and brutal. Friends disappeared overnight, dragged into prisons where silence reigned. Fear rippled through the movement, but it did not break. Eren felt the weight of it pressing down on him. Each disappearance was a wound, each arrest a reminder of the danger they faced. He lay awake at night, torn between terror and resolve. He wanted to cling to the peace he had found, but he knew peace was impossible while chains remained. And so he chose resolve. He stood taller, spoke louder, carried the weight of his fear like armor. He was no warrior, no strategist, no leader in the traditional sense. But he was a survivor, and survival itself was strength. The seeds of rebellion had been planted, watered with pain and hope. And now they began to grow. The rebellion began to take shape, no longer whispers but actions. Caelith's network expanded, reaching into every corner of the kingdom. Betas who had long been denied positions of influence began to step forward with inventions and ideas that could reshape society. Omegas, once silenced, spoke of their suffering and their dreams of freedom. Even Alphas weary of dominance joined, confessing the crushing expectations that had bound them since birth. Eren found himself swept into the current. He had once believed his role would be small, a shadow beside Caelith's brilliance. But the people looked to him, not for strength, but for proof. Proof that survival itself was power. Proof that endurance could inspire. He began to speak more often, his voice trembling but steady. "I was told I was weak," he said to a gathering one night. "I was discarded, humiliated, forgotten. But I survived. And survival is strength. If I can endure, so can you. And together, we can build a world where no one is measured by chains." The crowd erupted, voices rising in agreement. Eren felt the weight of their hope pressing upon him, and for the first time, he did not shrink beneath it. He carried it. Caelith's true strength began to reveal itself. Not in dominance, not in the suffocating aura of an alpha, but in vision. He spoke of equality, of dismantling the ABO system, of building a society where worth was not dictated by designation. His words were fire, and the people burned with them. But the ruling families struck back. Raids swept through districts, gatherings were broken, leaders arrested. Fear rippled through the movement, but it did not break. Each act of oppression only fueled the fire, only deepened the resolve. Eren felt the danger pressing closer. He feared for Caelith, for the network, for the fragile hope they had built. Yet he also knew there was no turning back. The seeds had been planted, and they had begun to grow. And so, Eren stood taller, spoke louder, carried the weight of his fear like armor. He was no longer merely surviving. He was part of a rebellion that would reshape the kingdom itself. The rebellion no longer hid in shadows. What had begun as whispers now surged into the streets. Secret gatherings became rallies, hushed conversations became declarations, and the people began to move with purpose. The 12 families, once untouchable, felt the tremors beneath their thrones. Eren stood at the heart of it, no longer the discarded Omega who had once been silenced. His voice carried through crowds, trembling but resolute. "We are more than the roles they force upon us," he declared to a gathering in the marketplace. "We are not defined by strength or designation. We are defined by our humanity, by our endurance, by our hope." The words spread like wildfire. Betas repeated them in workshops, Omegas whispered them in homes, Alphas murmured them in council halls. Eren's voice had become a symbol, proof that survival itself was strength. Caelith's vision crystallized. He no longer spoke only of equality in secret meetings. He began to outline plans for reform, dismantling the laws that bound Omegas to arranged marriages, opening positions of influence to Betas, freeing Alphas from suffocating expectations. His network grew bolder, his words sharper, his presence undeniable. But the ruling families struck back with fury. Raids swept through districts, gatherings were broken, leaders arrested. Friends disappeared overnight, dragged into prisons where silence reigned. Fear rippled through the movement, but it did not break. Each act of oppression only deepened the resolve, only fueled the fire. Eren felt the danger pressing closer. He feared for Caelith, for the network, for the fragile hope they had built. Yet he also knew there was no turning back. The seeds had been planted, watered with pain and hope, and now they had begun to grow into something unstoppable. One night, as they stood together beneath the stars, Caelith turned to him. "The storm is coming," he said softly. "And when it breaks, we must be ready." Eren's heart trembled, but his voice was steady. Then I will stand with you, whatever comes. And so, part 3 closes with Aaron's resolve solidified. No longer a shadow, no longer merely surviving, he had embraced his role fully. Beside Caliph, he would step into the storm, not as a pawn of lineage, but as a partner in a vision vast enough to reshape the kingdom itself.